Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So this starts the series against Fupalicious. So this is over a 2-week period, the games that we played. Let's get to it. And if you didn't hear beforehand, I was a little bit behind on recording videos, so I do apologize if you were expecting a video last week and I was sort of busy with other things, so of course I delivered with twice the amount of videos this week. So let's do this. C4, knight f6, knight c3, c6. So originally you might think this is very weird, right? What am I doing? I'm here to play d5. So here there are many ways to approach it. There is the Grunfeld way to play it. So after d5 takes, right? Knight takes, e4, knight takes, and there's d takes c3. There's the Grunfeld. This is what they call the anti-Grunfeld way to do it. So there's g6 and there's knight d7. But here, white has this very good endgame. So essentially, it's balanced, but it's playable for both sides. So another setup is just playing e5 and going with this g3, bishop g2 setup. Right, so that's another one. Black can also play e6 and d5, sort of like the Queen's Gambit declined, or the Queen's Gambit kind of structure, right? Another setup is g6 and go for the King's Indian setup. So there are many setups. There's even, if you want to get back into a Sicilian Najdorf or a Maroczy bind, there's the setup of playing c5 and d6. So for example, right, knight c6, knight f3, g6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4. There is the setup, right? There's knight takes d4. So there's bishop g7 here, bishop e3, d6, bishop e2, and this is all theory in the Maroczy bind opening. But instead, I played c6, and after e4, I played d6. And you'll notice that I could also play d5 here. I could also play e5 here. It's a matter of choice. I played d6, and after g3, I played knight bd7. I'm very tricky. This is a very tricky move order because I sort of open the possibility of going to e5. And the reason here is I want to target this pawn. But more importantly, I want to play knight d3 check. And Fupalicious makes the move that prevents both. Plays d3. Here I play h5. I'm very tricky. I plan to play h4 and h3. Just get some space and follow through with the threats. But then bishop g5 happens, and I'm very tricky. I play the move queen b6. Now, another tricky move would have been to play queen a5 and threaten knight takes d3 with the intent to go get the bishop. But I play queen b6. Now here's my reasoning. I want to use this knight to come to g4, attack f2, right? So I want to attack f2, I want to attack b2, and I want to use this knight. Keep an eye on this pawn, because this pawn is also very important to white's setup. So here queen d2 happens, and all of a sudden it arises tactical opportunity. So for one, there's this opportunity. Queen takes b2. That after queen takes b2, knight takes d3, that is a fork. But what did I think? I thought there's probably better. So I went for knight f to g4. I wanted to see if I could create more tricks. And indeed, castles, knight takes f2, bishop e3 leads to knight f takes d3. And ultimately, it is an infiltration of the position. So, what can we learn here? Well, I was very tricky this game, knight e5. Okay, so I would suggest that even here, play d4. Now, it's very small improvement, but d3 here is great. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just I play h5 and here play f4 because the thing is my knights, although they do not appear to look annoying, they're actually very annoying. And so if you even just scare them off one bit, so he goes back to d7 or he goes back to g6, you bring the other knight in, you complete development, and although bishop g5 is an okay move, it just queen b6 it was very tricky. I don't know how to really prevent it per se, but I would say f4 is just the way to go. Get the knight out and castle. I mean, if you want, because h4 may be threatening, but if you don't want to, then just develop your pieces in the center and try your best there. So honestly, it was just my tricks won the game. It wasn't because White played horribly or something. It wasn't because of that. It was just because my I just got my tricks to work. I was lucky and everything just went my way. Let's move on to the next game. C4, C5, just now changing it up. So now you see this slow strategic maneuver, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm taking control of the d4 square. This is basically a closed Sicilian. This is what we call a closed Sicilian. White tries to play a3 and b4 and f4, and black does somewhat the same thing. Sort of symmetrical in planning. So castles, bishop e3, and here I play knight d4 to prevent our friend Fupalicious from playing d4 himself. Queen d2, knight e to c6, and rook b1, a6, rook b8 is coming, b5 is coming. So here, bishop h6, and you can see I don't mind the trade of the bishops. It doesn't matter for me because I feel like there's more things going. And here, knight e2, Fupalicious is just trying to trade, and I say, you know what, if you really want to, I'll let you do it. And I make the first break. I play b5. I maybe want to get my bishop out, maybe want to get my queen out, but we'll see. Rook b to d1, very good move, threatening the move d4. At this point, I sort of think, okay, what can I do? And immediately I was like, queen f6, let me just first prevent d4. Let's hope nothing will happen from that. f4, very good. And now I play queen d4 because I obviously don't want d4 to happen, and I don't want e5 to happen without the queen having crossed that barrier. So queen f2, and I play the move e5. So at this point, queen f2, for me, it's drawn. It's what I believe it's pretty much drawn, set in stone. But what am I doing here? I'm trying to create chances. I want Fupalicious to take on d4 because then I take with a c pawn, and if he takes here, rook takes, I start to create pressure on these guys, and that is how I'm planning to outplay our friend Fupalicious. And somehow Fupalicious falls right into my spell. So here I could have also played rook c5 to control the open file, bishop d7, rook c8, followed by rook c2. That could have been a plan as well, but I decided to play a5, simply because I wanted to get the bishop out here. And then after rook c1, I reversed course. I said bishop e6, let me go for that a2 pawn, but after a3, now it's a bit different. So I believe the best move here, one of the best moves here is either rook c6, looking for the active play. I think this would have been the right idea, to go for something active, right? So rook c6, going for this pawn, like even though I go for this pawn, play b3, and after something like rook to b6, trade, or don't trade, rook to b6, bring the other rook to c2, and it's a game because you're attacking my weak pawn, and, when I say that the best defense is a counterattack, this essentially is a counterattack. So in the game you played, Fupalicious played a3. So now they say a3 is a mistake. Why? I mean, rook f to b8. Now, we sort of realize that this pawn is under attack. So what happens? Rook c to c2. And to me, remember, I always think this is a little bit too passive, right? Especially tying yourself to the will of this pawn is something you really don't want to do, but in this case you have to do it. So I play rook 8 to b6, just saying, you know what, you're never going to come down here and attack my pawn. So after f takes e5, d takes, now I start to go on the offensive. But now Fupalicious says, I'm going to go for that f7 pawn, but after bishop a2, there's b4. So in this case, I think I should have just went bishop e6, threatening this, but I decided to go bishop a2 because after b4, bring my bishop back, and after, there's rook b2 here, and after bishop e6, there's b takes a5 here, and so actually this is the way to get out of that tricky mess, but somehow I didn't see rook b2, so I went bishop b3, just saying, you know what, I'm still protecting this, I'm going to force you to take that pawn. So bishop h3 happened, and here I realized bishop d7. Okay, do I want to go for the gamble or do I not? So I do. Rook takes b5, a2, and at this point I realize, not a bad move, but rook c5, rook c1, queen, and after king h3, I played the move rook c1, just simply threatening the move here. So after rook b5, f6, right, rook b7, king h6, rook b2, and after something like rook d1, there's rook b3, and rook c1, rook b2, rook c3, rook d2, and eventually I'm going to bring my things in. But in the game, here's what happened. g4, and here I forced the trade, right? Either you trade and let me queen, or you move and I get a few extra pawns. And in the end, I did get a few extra pawns and I won the game. So what really caused the downfall of Fupalicious? Well, the trading was all fine. There was nothing much here. I kind of felt like, this one's hard to say because after c takes d4, yeah, I don't know. This one's a hard one to judge. I would say maybe wait, because here's the thing. This queen's not going to leave d4. I've cemented it to say, you know what, if you want to take it anytime. So I would say play something like b3 and just wait it out. But instead, queen takes, and I think the main thing was that after a3, rook to b8, I had all this play, and I felt like the idea that I was able to get so much play with the bishop and with the queen side, just it gave me the livelihood to win. So instead, I pointed out earlier that, going for rook c6 was the good option, right? Remember, going for the counterattack is always better than a passive defense. So thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed chess and keep pursuing your curiosity.